The emergency beacon screamed across every human frequency at once. New Haven Colony had gone silent 3 hours ago, and now the automated distress signal told a story that made Admiral David Cross feel cold, despite the warmth of his quarters. 2.3 million people. Gone. The data scrolling across his screen showed impact signatures consistent with military-grade plasma weapons. Not pirates, not accidents. This was deliberate. He dressed quickly and made his way through the corridors of Orbital Station 12. Other officers moved with the same grim purpose, their faces showing they already knew. Bad news traveled faster than official channels. By the time Cross reached the command center, his staff had assembled a preliminary report. Captain Rachel Stone stood at the central display, her jaw tight as she manipulated the holographic data. It was the Helion fleet, she said without preamble, their 7th battle group. They're claiming it was a training exercise gone wrong, equipment malfunction. Cross studied the trajectory patterns. He had spent 30 years in the Terran Defense Fleet and knew weapons fire when he saw it. That's a lie. These are deliberate targeting patterns. They hit population centers first, then infrastructure. Ambassador Webb is already en route to the council chambers. Stone continued. They've called an emergency session. Of course they have, Cross said bitterly. They want to control the narrative before we can respond. The next 18 hours were a bureaucratic nightmare that tested every ounce of Cross's patience. The Galactic Council chambers were designed to make humans feel small. The ceilings soared 30 meters high, perfect for the Helion delegates with their massive wingspans but utterly unnecessary for bipedal species. Ambassador Patricia Webb sat in the human-designated section, which was positioned in the back and required a translator device because the acoustics were tuned for avian vocal ranges. The Helion representative, a towering figure named High Chancellor Pren, addressed the council with what Cross assumed was supposed to be remorse. The translator rendered it as a series of melodious chirps and whistles before converting to standard language. The Helion Combine deeply regrets this unfortunate accident. Our fleet was conducting routine exercises when a cascade failure in the targeting systems resulted in weapons discharge. We are prepared to offer compensation according to standard protocols. Webb stood, her voice amplified by the translator. 2.3 million human lives lost and you call it routine? This was no accident. The attack patterns show deliberate. The human delegate will refrain from accusations, interrupted a member of the Quarix Dominion, its insectoid features impossible to read. The Helion Combine has acknowledged fault and offered reparations. This matter should be considered closed. Cross watched from the observation gallery as Webb fought a losing battle. The council had already decided. 47 species and not one of them wanted to hold the Helion accountable. The final vote was devastating. The Helion would pay minimal compensation, roughly equivalent to what they would spend on a single warship. No criminal charges. No disciplinary action. The matter was closed. But Cross had been busy during the proceedings. Dr. Liam Foster, the xenobiologist who had been stationed at New Haven's sister colony, had been analyzing data from the attack. What he found turned accident into conspiracy. New Haven sat on top of one of the largest deposits of rare heavy elements in known space. Elements that the Helion Combine had been trying to acquire for decades. Elements that humans had refused to sell at the prices offered. Foster's report landed on Cross's desk 3 days after the council's decision. The scientist's hands shook slightly as he delivered his findings in person. They wanted those deposits. New Haven was never going to sell, so they eliminated the problem. The Helion filed mining claims on the planet 6 hours after the attack. 6 hours, Admiral. They had the paperwork ready. Cross felt something shift inside him. For 47 years, humanity had played by the Council's rules. They had accepted being called Deathworlders, a term meant to mark them as primitive savages from a planet too dangerous for civilized life. They had endured restrictions on their fleet size, limits on their military technology, and constant reminders that they were the newest and least important members of galactic society. He called an emergency meeting of the Terran Defense Fleet's senior command. 23 admirals and generals gathered in the secure conference room, their faces grim. Cross laid out everything. The attack, the cover-up, the mining claims, the Council's complicity. They think we'll accept this, he said quietly. They think because we're from Earth, because we evolved on a Class 12 death world. that we're too stupid or too primitive to understand what happened. They're wrong. General Sarah Williams spoke up. What are you proposing, David? Cross pulled up a file that made several officers gasp. Protocol Ragnarok? It was a contingency plan developed decades ago, back when humanity first joined the Council. A plan for what to do if the Alliance ever became untenable. We withdraw. Completely. Every human ship, every station, every colony. We pull back to our core systems, and that's exactly what they want, or someone objected. They'll see it as proof we're not capable of being part of civilized society. Let them, Cross replied. Because we're not withdrawing to hide. We're withdrawing to prepare. He looked at each face in turn. They want to see what Deathworlders can do? We'll show them. The vote was unanimous. Protocol Ragnarok was activated within the hour. Orders went out across every human military channel. Return to Terran space. Cease all cooperation with Council forces. Implement total communications blackout. Ambassador Webb lodged a formal protest with the Council, then withdrew from the chambers. Her final statement was brief and cold. The Terran Federation demands full accountability for the massacre at New Haven. We demand prosecution of those responsible. We demand reparations that actually reflect the value of lives lost. We demand equal treatment under Council law. You have 30 days to respond. If you refuse, humanity will consider all treaties and agreements void. The Council's response came in 24 hours. It was a message of dismissal, dressed in diplomatic language that basically said humanity should accept their place or face sanctions. High Chancellor Pren even included a patronizing note about how Deathworlders had always been too emotional for the calm rationality required in galactic politics. Admiral Cross read the message 3 times. Then he activated the fleet-wide channel. Every human ship, from the largest battleship to the smallest scout vessel, received his words simultaneously. This is Admiral David Cross. As of this moment, the Terran Federation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All personnel are to return to home territory immediately. We are implementing full defensive protocols. They wanted to see what monsters from a Deathworld can do. They're about to learn. Across Council space, human ships began to move. They didn't rush. They didn't flee. They simply turned away from Council stations, from joint patrol routes, from every position they had held for nearly 5 decades. Alien commanders watched in confusion as their human counterparts offered brief farewells and departed without explanation. Within 3 days, every human vessel had vanished from Council territory. Colonies went dark, communication relays shut down, and trade routes closed. The Council members who had dismissed humanity's threats began to feel the first stirrings of concern. But it was High Chancellor Pren who truly worried them when he received a decoded transmission from Helion Intelligence Services. The humans weren't running. They were gathering, and whatever they were planning in the darkness beyond Council sensors, it was going to change everything. 3 months of silence had turned Council confidence into nervous uncertainty. The Quarix Dominion's trade minister was the first to sound the alarm when 16 cargo shipments from human space failed to arrive. These weren't military vessels or government transports. These were independent merchants who had been trading with Council worlds for decades. All of them had simply stopped coming. High Chancellor Pren convened a meeting of the Council's Security Committee in a chamber much smaller and less formal than the Grand Assembly Hall. Here, away from public record and official transcripts, the leaders of the major Council species could speak freely. And what they spoke about was fear disguised as concern. We should send a diplomatic envoy, suggested the Trevin representative, its aquatic suit bubbling slightly. Open communications again. The humans are clearly making a point about the New Haven incident. They're throwing a tantrum, Pren corrected. Deathworlders are known for emotional instability. Give them time to calm down and they'll come crawling back. Their economy depends on Council trade routes. But the Quarix delegate, an insectoid creature whose name translated roughly as Magistrate 17, disagreed. Its compound eyes reflected the dim lighting in unsettling ways. We have attempted to contact human colonies. All channels are silent, not blocked, silent, as if the equipment no longer exists. Impossible, Pren said. They have hundreds of settlements throughout their territories. They can't all have gone dark. Yet they have, Magistrate 17 insisted. Furthermore, 3 of our scout ships entered human space last week to investigate. They have not returned. The chamber fell quiet. Lost ships were not uncommon in deep space. Equipment failures, navigational errors, spatial anomalies. But 3 ships in 1 week. That was enemy action. Tren felt his feathers ruffle involuntarily. A biological response to danger that his species had never fully evolved past. "Send a battle group," he ordered. "If the humans are playing games, a show of force will remind them who controls this galaxy." The Quarix 7th Fleet was dispatched 2 days later. 43 warships, each carrying enough firepower to crack a small moon. They entered human territory near the outer colonies, where resistance should have been minimal. The fleet commander, Admiral Tren, had fought in 3 border conflicts and considered himself experienced in dealing with primitive species. His first indication that something was wrong came when sensors detected no activity at the colony world they approached. No orbital traffic, no communications, no power signatures. The entire planet appeared abandoned. Tren ordered a closer inspection, and that's when his fleet found the ships. They weren't hidden. They weren't lurking in ambush. They were just there, floating in formation at the edge of the system. Human ships, but not the designs the Council had seen before. These were larger, heavier, covered in armor plating that made them look more like flying fortresses than spacecraft, and there were hundreds of them. Tren opened a communication channel expecting negotiations or at least demands. What he got instead was a simple message in standard galactic language delivered in a flat, emotionless voice. "You have entered Terran territory without authorization. You have 30 seconds to reverse course. This is your only warning." 30 seconds. The arrogance of it made Tren's mandibles click in irritation. "This is Admiral Tren of the Quarix Dominion Fleet. We are here under Council authority to investigate the disappearance of..." The human ships opened fire. No further warnings, no negotiations, just immediate overwhelming violence. Tren barely had time to order evasive maneuvers before his flagship was hit by weapons that tore through shields, like they weren't even there. These weren't the standard plasma weapons or energy beams the Council used. These were solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds, kinetic accelerators that struck with the force of small asteroids. But it wasn't just the weapons that horrified Tren. It was how the human ships moved. They pulled maneuvers that should have killed every living thing aboard. Turns at 12 gravities, acceleration patterns that would crush most species into paste against their command chairs. The human vessels twisted and spun through space like fighters despite being the size of heavy cruisers. Tren's fleet tried to respond with standard Council tactics. Maintain formation, focus fire, wear down the enemy shields. But the humans didn't fight that way. They broke apart into small groups, surrounded individual Council ships and hammered them from multiple angles simultaneously. When one of Tren's cruisers managed to land a solid hit on a human vessel, the damaged ship didn't retreat. It accelerated directly toward the nearest Council ship and rammed it. The collision destroyed both vessels, but the tactic was clear. Humans were willing to trade ships 1 for 1, maybe because they had more ships to spare, or maybe because they simply didn't care about losses the way civilized species did. Tren watched 17 of his 43 ships disappear from sensors in the first 15 minutes of combat. His weapons officer reported that the human shields seemed to regenerate faster than they should, and their armor was absorbing damage that should have caused catastrophic failures. "They're built wrong," the weapons officer said, his voice tinged with panic. "Their ships have redundant systems for the redundant systems. Everything is over-engineered." Of course it was, Tren realized. These ships were built by deathworlders, species that evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. They designed their technology the same way. Tough, redundant, able to take punishment and keep functioning. He gave the order to retreat. His remaining ships turned and fled, pursued by human vessels that seemed to have no maximum speed. Tren lost another 6 ships during the withdrawal, before finally escaping back into Council space. Of his original 43 warships, only 20 made it back. More than 50% casualties in a single engagement. The report Tren delivered to the Council was classified immediately, but rumors spread anyway. The humans had new weapons, new ships, new tactics, and they were no longer playing by Council rules. Captain Rachel Stone watched the tactical data from that engagement aboard the TSS Defiance with grim satisfaction. The plan was working. Every Council probe into human space met the same response. Overwhelming force. No negotiations. No mercy. "They're starting to get scared," she said to Commander Neil Harper, who stood at her side reviewing deployment schedules. "Good. Fear is the first step." Harper was younger than Stone, early 30s, but he had proven himself during the withdrawal from Council space. His ability to anticipate enemy movements and counter them was almost prescient. The problem is fear might push them toward a larger response. If the whole council unites against us, then we do what Admiral Cross planned. Stone interrupted. We show them that numbers don't matter when you're willing to fight dirty. Dr. Liam Foster had been working around the clock in the research sections of humanity's military stations. The scientist had traded his academic robes for a military consultant position, and his expertise in xenobiology was proving invaluable. He understood how different species thought, how they fought, what frightened them, and he was helping the military weaponize that knowledge. The Helion have excellent vision but poor hearing and lower frequencies. He briefed a room full of naval officers. Their flight reflexes are fast but predictable. They bank right when startled because that's how their wings naturally fold. The quarks communicate through pheromones as much as sound. So disrupt the chemical signals and you disrupt their command structure. The Trevan are dependent on water cooling for their suits. Overheat the environment and they become sluggish. One officer raised a hand. Doctor, isn't this information supposed to help us understand our council allies? Foster's expression hardened. They stopped being our allies when they murdered New Haven. Now they're just targets, and I'm making sure we know how to hurt them. Back on Earth, Ambassador Patricia Webb made one final broadcast to the council before all diplomatic channels were severed. She looked tired. Decades of trying to build bridges between humanity and the galaxy had worn her down, but her voice was steady and cold. For 47 years we have tried to be your partners, your equals. You have denied us at every turn. You have treated us as primitive animals from a dangerous world. You were right about one thing. Earth is dangerous. It made us dangerous. And you just reminded us why we evolved to be predators. You wanted to see what Deathworlders can do when pushed too far. Watch closely. This is your only lesson. The transmission ended. Across human space, the fleets finished their preparations. New weapons came online. New tactics were drilled until every crew could execute them perfectly. And in the darkness beyond council sensors, humanity gathered its strength and prepared to teach the galaxy what it meant to anger a species that had survived the unsurvivable. High Chancellor Pren received intelligence reports from a dozen sources, all saying the same thing. The humans were coming, not to raid, not to harass. They were preparing for total war. He called for an emergency session of the full council and proposed the formation of a unity fleet, a combined force of 200,000 ships from 30 different species. Surely, he argued, such overwhelming numbers would force the humans to negotiate. What Pren didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that humans had stopped counting ships and started counting targets. Prime Station hung in space like a jewel, the greatest military installation ever built by the Galactic Council. 50 kilometers across, home to 2 million personnel, protected by shields that could withstand a supernova. At least that's what the engineering specifications claimed. Admiral David Cross studied the massive structure. Through the view screen of his command ship and smiled without humor. They built it to be impressive, he said to the assembled commanders on the tactical channel. They built it to be a symbol. They didn't build it to withstand what we're about to do. The Unity fleet surrounded Prime Station in a defensive formation that looked perfect on paper. 200,000 ships from 30 species, each positioned according to centuries of accepted military doctrine, overlapping fields of fire, layered shield coverage, multiple fallback positions. It was beautiful in its precision, and it was about to become a graveyard. Captain Rachel Stone listened to the briefing from her position aboard the TSS Defiance. Her ship was one of the new heavy cruisers, built with human engineering principles, redundant systems, armor thick enough to shrug off direct hits, engines powerful enough to pull maneuvers that would kill anyone not adapted to high gravity. Around her, the bridge crew worked in silence, their faces set in grim determination. Remember, Cross continued, they think like prey animals. They cluster together for safety. They rely on numbers and defensive positions. We're going to teach them that sometimes the best defense is not being where the predator expects you to be. The human fleet numbered just 2,000 ships, 100-to-1 odds. The Council fleet outnumbered them so completely that several of their military analysts had suggested the humans would surrender rather than face certain annihilation. Those analysts were about to learn an important lesson about Deathworlders. Surrender was not in their vocabulary. Cross gave the order, and the human fleet attacked in a way that made no sense to Council tactical doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and engaging from range, the human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy lines. They moved at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels their size, pulling 12 and 15 gravity maneuvers that would have liquefied most species. Stone felt the acceleration crush her into her command chair. Her vision tunneled slightly at the edges, and she heard one of her junior officers grunt in pain, but they had trained for this. Months of high-gravity conditioning, special suits that helped distribute the pressure, and the simple fact that humans evolved on a world where gravity wanted to kill them every day. What was unbearable for other species was merely uncomfortable for humans. The Defiance punched through the Council's outer defensive line before they could properly react. Stone's weapons officer opened fire with the kinetic accelerators, solid metal projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. They struck a Helian battleship and punched straight through its shields, through its armor, and out the other side. The massive vessel broke apart in a chain of explosions that took 3 smaller ships with it. All ships execute pattern Ragnarok 7, Cross ordered. The human fleet split into groups of 50, each targeting a different section of the Council formation. They didn't try to destroy everything. They targeted command ships, supply vessels, and communication relays. Cut off the head, Stone thought, and the body dies. Commander Neil Harper prepared for his part of the operation from the drop bay of a Marine assault ship. Around him, 300 soldiers checked their weapons and armor, their faces hidden behind sealed helmets. Their objective was simple: board the Council flagship, eliminate High Chancellor Pren, and prove that no one was safe from human retribution. The assault ship accelerated hard enough to make Harper's teeth ache. They covered the distance to the Council flagship in under 2 minutes, point defense systems shredding several other boarding craft, but missing theirs through a combination of evasive flying and pure luck. The ship slammed into the hull of the Council vessel and immediately began cutting through. 30 seconds to breach, the pilot announced. Harper checked his weapon one more time. It was a simple kinetic rifle, firing solid metal rounds, no fancy plasma or energy weapons, just bullets, because bullets worked everywhere and didn't care about shields or electronic countermeasures. The breach opened, and Harper's team poured through into a corridor filled with Helian defenders. The avian creatures stood nearly 3 meters tall, their wings folded tight in the confined space. They opened fire with plasma rifles that filled the air with superheated bolts. 2 Marines went down, their armor scorched but not penetrated. The rest returned fire with their kinetic weapons, and the Helion lines collapsed. It wasn't that the Council defenders were cowards. They fought bravely, but they had evolved on planets where violence was rare and ritualized. They fought with honor codes and rules of engagement. Harper and his Marines had evolved on Earth, where everything from the weather to the local wildlife tried to murder them daily. They fought with the efficiency of predators who knew that hesitation meant death. The team moved through the ship like a virus, ignoring side passages and secondary objectives. Their target was the command deck, and nothing was going to stop them. They encountered heavier resistance near the bridge, Quark soldiers in powered armor that made them dangerous opponents. But Harper had trained for this. The Quarks relied on pheromone communication, chemical signals that coordinated their movements. Gas grenades, Harper ordered. His team deployed canisters that flooded the corridor with a chemical compound Dr. Foster had designed. It didn't kill the Quarks. It just overwhelmed their senses, made them unable to communicate, turned their coordinated defense into confused chaos. Harper's Marines advanced through the disrupted enemy formation and reached the bridge in minutes. High Chancellor Pren stood at the center of his command deck, feathers ruffled in alarm as human soldiers burst through his final line of defense. He was surrounded by his command staff, all of them staring at the armored figures with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Harper removed his helmet and looked the Helian leader in the eyes. "Admiral Cross sends his regards," Harper said. Then he activated his communicator. "Target secured. The flagship is ours." Outside, the battle continued with brutal efficiency. The Council fleet was discovering that numerical superiority meant nothing when your enemy was willing to trade ships freely. A human destroyer, its shields down and hull breached, accelerated directly into a Council carrier and detonated its reactor core. The explosion vaporized both ships and damaged a dozen others nearby. Stone watched from the Defiance as another human ship executed a suicide run. Part of her recoiled at the waste of life, but the cold, tactical part of her brain understood the calculation. Every human ship that traded itself for a council vessel shifted the odds a little more. And unlike the council, which would become demoralized by such losses, human crews volunteered for these missions. "They're breaking," her tactical officer reported. "The council formation is collapsing." It was true. The Unity fleet, so impressive in its numbers, was fracturing under pressure. Ships from different species were falling back to their own kind, breaking the careful integration that was supposed to be their strength. The Helian fell back to protect their own carriers. The Quarks clustered around their hive ships. The Treven withdrew entirely, their aquatic commanders deciding that this battle was not worth their losses. Admiral Cross watched the dissolution of enemy forces with cold satisfaction. This was the problem with alliances built on politics rather than trust. Under pressure, everyone looked out for themselves first. He opened a general broadcast on all council frequencies. "This is Admiral David Cross of the Terran Defense Fleet. You came here to intimidate us with your numbers, to remind us of our place in your galactic order. Instead, you've reminded us why we survived when everything on our planet tried to kill us. We learned to be meaner, tougher, and more determined than anything we faced. You wanted to see monsters? Look at your sensors. We're the things that go bump in the void." The broadcast was psychological warfare as much as military communication. Let them know that humans were not fighting with desperation but with calculated fury. Let them understand that this was not a species on the verge of defeat, but a species that had finally decided to stop playing nice. Dr. Foster monitored the battle from a research station in human territory. His screen showed biological data from captured council personnel, medical telemetry from human soldiers, and tactical analysis of the ongoing combat. What he saw confirmed his theories. The council species were not weak, but they were not adapted for this kind of warfare. They fought like civilized beings who had agreed upon rules. Humans fought like survivors of a world that had no rules except kill or be killed. Every advantage humans had, from their ability to withstand high acceleration to their psychological resistance to horror, came from Earth. Their deathworld had made them into the perfect warriors, and the Council was paying the price for forgetting that. The battle for Prime Station lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Unity fleet had lost more than 60% of its ships. Prime Station itself was heavily damaged, its shields collapsed, its command sections under human control. High Chancellor Pren was a prisoner aboard a human vessel, and the Council was faced with a terrifying reality. The humans were not going to stop. This was not a raid or a punitive expedition. This was the beginning of total war, and the species from the Deathworld was going to prosecute it with every advantage evolution had given them. Captain Stone received new orders from Admiral Cross as the human fleet regrouped. They were not returning to defensive positions. They were splitting into strike groups, each assigned to a different Council Core world. "No mercy," Cross said simply. "They wanted to see what we could do. We're going to show them. Every world that supported the attack on New Haven pays the price. Every species that voted to dismiss our grievances learns what it means to anger a Deathworld species." Stone acknowledged the orders and felt something twist in her gut. They had won a battle, but the war was just beginning, and she wondered how far humanity would go before someone found the wisdom to stop. The siege of Helion Prime began not with bombardment, but with silence. Human ships arrived in orbit and simply waited. Their weapons trained on the surface but not firing. For 3 days, nothing happened. The planetary population of 8 billion watched the sky nervously, waiting for destruction that did not come. Then the broadcast started. Every communication channel on the planet received the same message, delivered in perfect Helion language. Images of New Haven before the attack. Families going about their daily lives. Children playing in parks. Then footage of the aftermath. Bodies floating in space where the colony had been. Finally, a simple statement from Admiral Cross. 2.3 million humans died because your government wanted their land. You elected leaders who committed genocide for profit. Now you will understand what that feels like. Commander Neil Harper walked through the occupied government district of Helion Prime, his Marines securing buildings and processing prisoners. The city around them was mostly intact but empty, its population having fled to the countryside or underground shelters. His orders were clear. Disable infrastructure, capture leadership, and prepare for occupation. What bothered him was how easy it had been. The Helian defense forces had collapsed almost immediately. A few token battles, then mass surrenders. Harper had expected more resistance, but Dr. Foster's assessment had been correct. The Helian were not warriors. They were bureaucrats and merchants who had forgotten what real war looked like. Their military existed to intimidate lesser species, not to fight determined enemies. A young Helian, barely adult by their species standards, was brought before Harper by two Marines. The creature's feathers were dull with stress and its wings trembled. Through a translator, it begged for mercy, insisted it had nothing to do with government decisions, just wanted to live. Harper felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. "You're free to go," he said quietly. "Find shelter. Stay away from military installations. If you follow those rules, you'll be safe." The young Helian fled without another word. One of Harper's Marines, a veteran named Rodriguez, watched it go and then looked at his commander. "Sir, are we the good guys in this?" It was a question Harper had been avoiding. They had justification for being here. New Haven deserved justice. But looking at terrified civilians and destroyed infrastructure, he was starting to wonder if justice and vengeance had become impossible to separate. Light years away, Captain Rachel Stone commanded a different kind of operation. The Quarix hive cluster was not a single planet, but a network of orbital habitats connected by transport tubes. Millions of Quarix lived and worked in the structures, their insectoid society functioning like a single organism. Stone's orders were to sever the connections between hives and force them to surrender individually. "Target the junction nodes," she ordered. The Defiance's weapons carved through the massive tubes, severing links that had existed for centuries. Entire hive sections went dark as power and life support failed. Stone watched thousands of Quarix evacuate in emergency pods, their orderly society reduced to panicked survival. "Captain, we're receiving surrender offers from 14 hive sections," her communications officer reported. "They're asking for terms." Stone pulled up the list of demands Admiral Cross had authorized. They were harsh: disarmament, reparations, acceptance of human military governors, war crimes trials for anyone involved in New Haven's destruction. The Quarix would effectively become a protectorate, their independence stripped away. "Send them the terms," Stone said. "They have 6 hours to accept." But not all Council species chose surrender. The Treven Deep, a massive ocean world, proved difficult to attack. The aquatic species had retreated to underwater cities that human weapons could not easily reach. Traditional bombardment would require cracking the planet's crust, an act of genocide that even Cross had not authorized. Dr. Foster provided a solution, though his expression showed he did not like it. "Thermal weapons. We heat the upper ocean layers to the point where it becomes uninhabitable. Force them to choose between deep retreat or surrender. It's not permanent. The oceans will cool over time." The weapon was deployed and Treven Deep's surface waters began to boil. The Treven had evolved in cold, deep ocean trenches. Warm water was as hostile to them as vacuum was to humans. Within days, their government sent desperate pleas for ceasefire. Cross ignored them. Only when formal surrender documents were signed did he order the thermal weapons deactivated. Ambassador Patricia Webb watched all of this from her hidden location in neutral space. She had not returned to human territory after the Council withdrew its recognition. Instead, she had begun quiet negotiations with moderate Council species, those who had opposed the dismissal of New Haven's justice. There were more of them than she had expected. A Treven diplomat, its environmental suit damaged and poorly maintained, met with her in a secure location. Its translator device rendered its anguished clicks and whistles into standard language. "Why are they doing this? We voted against dismissing your grievances. We supported human equality measures." Webb felt old and tired. "Because Admiral Cross has decided that partial justice is no justice at all. The Council as a whole is guilty, and he is making all of you pay." "Can you stop him?" the Treven asked desperately. "I don't know," Webb admitted. "He is not listening to diplomatic channels anymore. He has become what they accused humans of being, a monster from a deathworld interested only in destruction." But Webb knew it was more complicated than that. Cross was not insane or mindlessly violent. He was making a calculated choice. Break the Council completely, so it could never threaten humanity again. Prove that humans were not to be trifled with. Create a new galactic order where Earth stood as an equal, respected through fear if not friendship. The moral complexity of the situation weighed on everyone involved. On Helion Prime, Harper's Marines found themselves protecting civilian populations from their own government's attempts to conscript them for defense. On the Corix hive clusters, Stone's crew delivered humanitarian supplies even as they enforced occupation. The humans were trying to be conquerors with conscience, and it was tearing them apart. Admiral Cross received reports of dissent among his commanders. Some wanted to ease the occupation terms. Others argued for even harsher measures. Captain Stone submitted a formal request for clarification on mission objectives. Was the goal punishment or security? Vengeance or deterrence? Cross called a virtual conference of his senior staff. Faces appeared on screens from across council space, each showing the strain of months of warfare. He looked at them and saw doubt where there had once been certainty. "I know what some of you are thinking," he said without preamble, "that we have gone too far, that we are becoming the monsters they accused us of being. But remember New Haven. Remember how the council laughed at our pain. Remember how they valued their politics over our lives. We are not monsters. We are teachers, and the lesson is simple. Never again." Commander Harper spoke up, something few officers would have dared. "Sir, with respect, we have made our point. 15 council species have surrendered. 8 more are negotiating. The council as a political entity is broken. We can stop now." "If we stop now, they will rebuild," Cross replied coldly. "Give them 20 years, 30, and they will forget why they feared us. The next generation of council leaders will see our mercy as weakness. No, we finish this completely." Dr. Foster entered the conversation with data. "Admiral, I have been analyzing the political structures of council species. Many of them were opposed to the actions against New Haven. The Helian military acted without full government approval. The council vote was influenced by backroom deals and threats. We are punishing entire civilizations for the actions of their leaders." "Then they should choose better leaders," Cross said flatly. Captain Stone felt her patience break. "Admiral, you are turning us into exactly what they feared. A deathworld species that solves problems through violence. Is that really the legacy you want for humanity?" The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Cross looked at Stone for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke in a voice that carried the weight of every decision he had made. "Captain Stone, you are relieved of command. Report to the nearest human facility for reassignment." The conference channel erupted in protests, but Cross ended the transmission. Stone sat alone on her bridge, surrounded by her crew who looked at her with a mixture of shock and respect. Her executive officer approached carefully. "Captain, what are your orders?" Stone made a decision that would change everything. "Put out a call on secure channels. Any ship commanders who want to discuss the current situation. I will be hosting a private conference in 6 hours. Make it clear this is not mutiny. This is about the soul of who we are as a species." 6 hours later, 60% of the human fleet command staff joined her conference. They talked through the night about duty and morality, about justice and vengeance, about what it meant to be human. By dawn, a decision had been reached. Captain Rachel Stone sent a single message to Admiral David Cross. "Sir, effective immediately. I am assuming operational command of fleet elements concerned with occupation and reconstruction. You retain command of offensive operations. This is not mutiny. This is necessary reorganization to ensure we do not lose ourselves in this war. Acknowledge these terms or we proceed without your approval." Cross read the message 3 times. Around him, his most loyal officers waited for orders to arrest Stone and her supporters. But Cross was not a fool. He understood what was happening. The fleet was fracturing, and if he pushed, it would break completely. Worse, Stone might be right. Perhaps they had gone far enough. His response was brief. "Acknowledged. Proceed with your operations, Captain. I will await your results." As Stone began implementing more moderate occupation policies, the galaxy held its breath. The humans had shown they could destroy with terrifying efficiency. Now they would prove whether they could also build something better from the ashes of war. 18 council species had formally surrendered within 4 months of the war's beginning. Commander Neil Harper found himself appointed as military governor of Helion Prime, a position he had never wanted and was not entirely sure he deserved. His office overlooked the capital city, where repair crews worked to restore infrastructure damaged during the initial assault. The irony was not lost on him. Humans destroyed, then rebuilt, then claimed to be liberators. The real work was uglier than combat had been. Refugee camps overflowed with displaced Helion civilians. Food distribution systems had collapsed, requiring human logistics to prevent starvation. The old government was gone, its leaders awaiting trial, but no replacement existed yet. Harper spent his days making decisions that affected millions of lives, and his nights wondering if any of those decisions were right. A delegation of Helian civilians requested a meeting. Harper agreed, expecting complaints or demands. What he got instead surprised him. The leader, an elderly Helian whose feathers had gone silver with age, bowed in the formal style of her species. "We wish to thank you," she said through the translator. "Our government had become corrupt. They started the war with New Haven for profit, not security. Many of us opposed it, but we had no voice. You have given us that voice." Harper felt uncomfortable with gratitude for what had been essentially conquest. "I am not sure liberation at gunpoint counts as freedom." "Perhaps not," the elder agreed. "But it is more freedom than we had. Will you stay? Help us build a new government that serves all Helion, not just the wealthy?" It was a question Harper could not answer. His orders came from Captain Stone, who was implementing what she called reconciliation protocols. But ultimate authority still rested with Admiral Cross, and Cross had not shown any inclination toward long-term cooperation. The situation was unstable, held together by goodwill that could evaporate with a single order from above. Light years away, Captain Rachel Stone dealt with her own complications. The Quarix hive clusters were slowly reorganizing under human oversight, but the insectoid species' social structure made governance nearly impossible. They thought collectively, made decisions through pheromone consensus, and struggled to understand human concepts like individual rights and personal freedom. "They do not want democracy," Dr. Foster explained during a briefing. "Their biology makes it almost incomprehensible. They want a stable hierarchy with clear roles. We are trying to force them into a system that makes no sense for their species." "So what do we do?" Stone asked, frustrated. "Leave them under military occupation forever?" "We adapt," Foster said simply. "Let them choose their own government structure. Ensure it has accountability and protections for individuals, but do not force them to copy human systems." It was reasonable advice, but it required flexibility that military occupation rarely allowed. Stone was trying to thread an impossible needle. Be firm enough to maintain control, but gentle enough to build trust. Act as conquerors while preaching cooperation. Every day brought new crises that had no clear solutions. Ambassador Patricia Webb emerged from hiding with evidence that changed everything. She had spent months gathering data, conducting interviews, and assembling a case. What she brought to Captain Stone was explosive. Documentation proving that the New Haven attack had been planned by a small faction within the Helian military command, not the full council government. Transcripts of council sessions showing that 31 species had voted against human restrictions. Financial records proving that the conspiracy was limited to a few individuals seeking personal profit. The council was guilty of incompetence and prejudice, Webb said, her voice heavy with implications, but not genocide. That was the work of High Chancellor Pren and 6 senior military commanders. "We have been punishing billions for the crimes of a handful." Stone read through the evidence with growing horror. If Webb was right and the data seemed solid, then humanity had waged total war against largely innocent civilizations. Yes, they had discriminated against humans. Yes, they had failed to deliver justice, but mass destruction of their societies was a punishment far exceeding the crime. "Does Admiral Cross know about this?" Stone asked. "I sent him the full report 3 days ago," Webb replied. "He has not responded." Stone tried to reach Cross through official channels and was stonewalled by his staff. The Admiral was unavailable, his location classified, his current operations eyes only. She realized with growing alarm that Cross had not stopped offensive operations, despite her reorganization of occupation forces. He was still out there, still fighting, still punishing Council worlds. She made a decision that could be considered treason. Using her command codes, she accessed Admiral Cross's tactical network and discovered his current location. He was preparing to assault the Trevin home system with a new weapon, something Foster had designed but recommended against deploying. A resonance device that would destabilize the planet's tectonic structure, causing earthquakes across the entire world. "He is going to kill billions," Stone said quietly. She looked at her senior staff, all of whom had read the same intelligence. "We have to stop him." What followed was the most painful decision of Stone's life. She sent a message to all fleet commanders, explaining the evidence Webb had gathered. She outlined the minimal actual guilt of most Council species. She made her case for why Cross's continued offensive operations were not justice but atrocity. Then she gave an order she never thought she would give. All ships are to converge on the Trevon home system. We are going to prevent Admiral Cross from deploying that weapon. If he resists, we will disable his ships. This is not mutiny. This is us remembering who we are supposed to be. 60% of the fleet responded to her call. 40% remained loyal to Cross, or at least to the chain of command he represented. For 3 days, human ships raced toward the Trevon system, a civil war brewing within the fleet that had just finished fighting a galactic war. Admiral David Cross watched Stone's ships arrive and felt betrayed. He had done everything to protect humanity, to ensure they would never be victimized again. And now his own people were turning against him. He had the resonance weapon armed and ready. One order would deploy it, send a message to the galaxy that humanity would not be stopped by sentiment or weakness. Commander Rodriguez, still serving under Cross, approached him carefully. "Sir, Captain Stone is hailing us. She wants to talk." "Tell her I have nothing to say to mutineers," Cross replied coldly. "Sir, with respect, 60% of the fleet is with her. If we fight, we will lose. More importantly, we will destroy the unity that has kept humanity strong." Cross turned on him angrily. "Unity? She is tearing us apart." "I am trying to secure our future, and she is worried about the feelings of species that tried to eliminate us." "No, sir," Rodriguez said quietly. "She is worried about our souls. There is a difference between being strong and being monsters. You taught me that years ago. Have you forgotten?" The words hit Cross harder than he wanted to admit. He thought about New Haven, about the rage that had driven him for months. But he also thought about the refugees Harper was helping, about the Helion civilians who had thanked humans for overthrowing their corrupt government. Was Webb right? Had they been punishing the wrong people? Stone's transmission came through and Cross finally accepted it. Her face appeared on his screen, tired but determined. They stared at each other for a long moment before Stone spoke. "David, I know you are angry. I am angry too. But we have to stop. Not because the Council deserves mercy, because we deserve to remain human. If we cross this line, if we commit genocide against innocent populations, we become exactly what they feared we were. And if we stop now," Cross asked bitterly, "they will rebuild. They will remember this as human aggression, not justice for New Haven. The next generation will want revenge." "Maybe," Stone acknowledged. "Or maybe they will remember that we stopped, that we chose justice over vengeance, that we were strong enough to be merciful when we did not have to be. Either way, we have to try." Cross looked at the weapon controls, then at Rodriguez, then back at Stone. He thought about the oath he had taken decades ago to protect humanity and defend its values. Somewhere in the rage and pain of losing New Haven, he had forgotten that strength was not just about destroying enemies. It was about knowing when to stop. "Stand down the weapon," he ordered quietly. "All ships, cease offensive operations." The relief on Stone's face was visible even across light years of space. But there was no time to celebrate. Alarms began sounding across every human ship simultaneously. Long-range sensors had detected something at the edge of the system. Something that made the Unity fleet look small by comparison. Dr. Foster accessed the data and felt his blood run cold. They are not Council signatures. These are unknown configurations. Thousands of them. An open transmission came through, on all frequencies, the voice alien, and filled with something that might have been amusement. "Fascinating. The prey species and the Deathworlders have been destroying each other quite thoroughly. We were content to wait until you were all weak enough. But this sudden outbreak of conscience is disappointing. Perhaps we should introduce ourselves. We are the Ravagers, and this galaxy belongs to us now." The transmission ended, and Cross looked at Stone with the sick realization that they had both been wrong. The galaxy's real predators had been watching all along, waiting for humans and the Council to weaken each other, and now they were here to finish what humanity had started. The Ravager fleet did not bother with warnings or negotiations. They simply attacked, their weapons tearing through space with a precision that made Council technology look primitive. 3 human ships vanished in the first 30 seconds, their shields overwhelmed by energy weapons that operated on principles Dr. Foster could not immediately identify. Captain Rachel Stone felt the Defiance shudder under a direct hit that would have destroyed any Council vessel. "Return fire all weapons," she ordered. The kinetic accelerators that had devastated Council fleets bounced harmlessly off Ravager shields. Energy weapons from captured Council ships were absorbed without visible effect. Stone watched helplessly as another human cruiser broke apart under sustained bombardment. "Someone tell me we have something that can hurt these things." Admiral David Cross had the same problem. His flagship, equipped with the best weapons humanity had developed, was barely scratching the enemy. The Ravagers moved with a speed that suggested they understood human tactics better than humans did themselves. Worse, their ships seemed to regenerate damage almost instantly, hull breaches sealing themselves in seconds. "They have been watching us," Cross realized aloud. "Every battle we fought, every tactic we used. They studied us while we tore each other apart." Commander Neil Harper received the emergency transmission on Helion Prime and felt his stomach drop. The Ravagers had entered the system, and they were not interested in occupation. They were interested in extermination. His scanners showed dozens of enemy ships approaching the planet, their weapons charging for orbital bombardment. He opened a channel to the Helion population. "This is Commander Harper of the Terran Defense Fleet. Unknown hostile forces are inbound. All civilians are to evacuate to underground shelters immediately. Our forces will defend this world." He paused, then added something that surprised even himself. "Your world. We will defend your world." High Chancellor Pren, imprisoned aboard a human ship, watched the battle unfold through a viewport. The very species that had conquered his civilization was now fighting to protect it from something worse. He had spent months hating humans for what they had done to his people. Now he was watching them die trying to save those same people. The irony was almost too much to process. Ambassador Patricia Webb reached Captain Stone through heavily encrypted channels. "Rachel, the Ravagers have hit 6 systems simultaneously. They are not trying to conquer, they are trying to wipe out everything. We need the Council fleet, what remains of it. We need every ship we can get." "The Council fleet?" Stone replied incredulously. "In case you forgot, we just spent 4 months destroying it. Why would they help us?" "Because the Ravagers will kill them too," Webb said simply. "Send me authority to negotiate on behalf of the Terran Federation. Let me try to build an alliance while you buy us time." Stone looked at Admiral Cross, who had rejoined her tactical network. The old admiral looked tired but clear-eyed in a way he had not been for months. He nodded slowly. "Do it. We have been fighting the wrong war. Time to fix that." Webb began the hardest diplomatic mission of her life. She contacted every Council species that had communications still operational, sending the same message. "The Ravagers are here. They will destroy all of us. Humans will fight beside you if you will fight beside us. Put aside what happened and survive, or maintain your pride and die. Choose quickly." The first response came from an unexpected source. The Trevan, whose homeworld Cross had nearly destroyed hours earlier, sent a message through their aquatic diplomatic channels. "We will fight. Send us tactical data on Ravager weaknesses." "We do not have any weaknesses identified yet," Webb admitted. "We are still trying to hurt them." "Then we will find them together," the Trevan diplomat replied. "Your Dr. Foster is a xenobiologist, yes? We have scientists who specialize in silicon-based life analysis. Send them to us, we will work together." More responses came in. The Quarks offered their hive ship manufacturing capabilities to build new weapons. The Helion, even with High Chancellor Pren imprisoned, sent their remaining fleet to join the defense. 15 Council species committed forces within the first hour. 8 more joined in the second hour. Not all of them trusted humans, and not all of them had forgiven what happened, but they all understood survival. Dr. Foster found himself working with alien scientists in ways he had never imagined. A Trevan biologist named Selnfor examined Ravager debris with equipment that made human sensors look crude. "They are silicon-based as you suspected, but they have carbon hybrid components. They have been consuming civilizations and integrating their technology. Can we exploit the silicon-based nature? Foster asked. Some kind of resonance weapon? Perhaps, Cellin 4 replied. But the carbon hybridization protects them from simple frequency attacks. We need something more sophisticated. The Trevan. Scientist worked in silence for several minutes, then made an excited bubbling sound. What if we do not attack the silicon structure? What if we attack the carbon integration? Make their own adaptations turn against them? It was brilliant, and it was something neither species could have developed alone. Foster began designing a weapon with Cellin 4 that targeted the specific chemical bonds between silicon and carbon structures. If it worked, the Ravagers would literally fall apart at the molecular level. If it did not work, they had wasted precious time. Captain Stone commanded a mixed fleet of human and council ships, trying to coordinate tactics between species that used completely different combat doctrines. The Helion wanted to maintain formation and focus fire. The Quarks wanted to swarm and overwhelm. The humans wanted to strike hard and fast, trading ships for kills. None of it was working against an enemy that seemed to predict every move. Commander Harper, defending Helion Prime, discovered something crucial. The Ravagers were more vulnerable to kinetic weapons than energy weapons, not by much, but enough to matter. He sent his findings to Stone immediately. They have adapted to energy-based attacks from consuming other civilizations, but Earth-style kinetic weapons are new to them. It is not much, but it is something. Stone seized on the information. All council ships focus energy weapons on their shields. All human ships target with kinetics the moment shields fluctuate. Coordinate timing. We need to hit them simultaneously. The combined fleet tried the new tactic, and for the first time, Ravager ships began taking serious damage. It was still brutal. For every enemy ship destroyed, the Alliance lost 3 of its own. But it was progress, and progress meant hope. Admiral Cross and High Chancellor Pren found themselves on the same bridge, circumstances forcing a conversation neither wanted. Pren spoke first, his translator rendering the Helion clicks into standard language. Why are you doing this? After everything that has happened, why are you defending my world? Cross considered the question carefully. Because I was wrong. Not about New Haven. That was genocide, and someone had to answer for it. But I was wrong about who was guilty. I punished your entire civilization for the crimes of your leaders. That makes me as guilty as those leaders were. You could have used that weapon, Pren said quietly. The one that would have destroyed my homeworld. But you did not. Why? Because Captain Stone reminded me what we were supposed to be, Cross replied. Humans are from a death world. Everything on Earth tried to kill us. We survived by being tougher, meaner, and more stubborn than anything we faced. But we also survived by working together, by protecting the weak, by choosing to be more than just survivors. We forgot that. The Ravagers reminded us. Dr. Foster and Cellin 4 completed their weapon prototype in 72 hours, working without sleep and surviving on stimulants that were probably taking years off their lives. The device was crude, rushed, and completely untested. They loaded it onto a human torpedo and programmed it to detonate inside Ravager shields. The test firing was conducted during an engagement near the Quarks hive clusters. Stone's tactical officer launched the weapon at a Ravager cruiser, and everyone held their breath. The torpedo penetrated the shields using human kinetic force, then detonated. The chemical weapon Foster had designed flooded the enemy ship, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the Ravager vessel simply fell apart, its structure disintegrating as carbon-silicon bonds broke down at the molecular level. Cheers erupted across the combined fleet. They had a weapon that worked. Now they needed to mass-produce it fast enough to matter. The Quarks hive ships went into full production mode, their insectoid efficiency creating thousands of the weapons in days. Human crews loaded them onto every ship in the fleet. Council vessels reconfigured their torpedo tubes to fire the new ammunition. The Battle of the Galactic Core was not a single engagement, but a week-long running fight that stretched across a dozen systems. The Ravagers threw everything they had at the Alliance, trying to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. But the combined fleet had learned to fight together. Helion ships provided long-range fire support. Quarks vessels swarmed and distracted. Trevan ships built for deep ocean pressure proved surprisingly durable in space combat, and human ships did what Deathworlders did best, accepted brutal casualties and kept fighting anyway. Commander Harper led a ground defense when Ravagers attempted to land forces on Helion Prime. His Marines fought alongside Helion planetary defense forces, the two groups covering each other's weaknesses. Humans could take more damage and fight in conditions that would kill Helion. But the avian species had better sensory capabilities and could maneuver in 3 dimensions naturally. A young Helion soldier, barely trained, saved Harper's life when a Ravager trooper nearly killed him. The soldier died seconds later, but Harper survived. He looked at the alien corpse and felt something break inside him. This person had every reason to hate humans and yet had died protecting one. That was worth more than any victory. The tide of battle turned slowly. Each day the Alliance lost fewer ships. Each engagement they destroyed more Ravagers. Dr. Foster's weapon was upgraded 3 times as they learned more about enemy biology. Tactics improved as different species learned to complement each other's strengths. Trust built through shared sacrifice. After 7 days, the Ravager fleet broke. The survivors fled toward the Galactic Rim, pursued by Alliance ships that had orders to ensure they never returned. 50% casualties on the Alliance side. Entire Council species nearly extinct. Human losses were staggering, but they had survived and they had done it together. Captain Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the Defiance, now promoted to Fleet Admiral by combined Human Council vote. Around her, the crew was mixed. Human, Helion, Quarix, Trevin, and others. It had seemed impossible months ago. But desperation and survival had made it necessary, and necessity had made it work. Ambassador Webb coordinated the formal alliance treaty. The Terran Council Compact, it was called. Humans gained equal status, their military integrated with Council forces. A joint government was formed, with representatives from all species sharing power. The restrictions that had defined humanity's second-class status were eliminated. In their place came recognition that Deathworld species brought strengths the galaxy needed. Admiral David Cross attended the memorial service for New Haven, and all those lost in the war. High Chancellor Pren stood beside him, both of them placing markers for the dead. They did not speak, but something passed between them. Recognition that they had both been right and wrong, that justice was more complicated than either had understood. "Do you think they will remember what we learned?" Pren asked finally. "That we are stronger together than divided?" "Some will," Cross replied. "Others will forget as soon as the danger passes. That is how civilizations work. But enough will remember, and when the next threat comes, because there is always a next threat, we will stand together again." Commander Neil Harper was appointed as ambassador to Helion Prime, a civilian role he accepted reluctantly. His first act was to help establish a memorial to the Helion soldiers who had died defending their world alongside humans. His second act was to recommend that former enemies be allowed to tell their stories, because understanding came from listening. Dr. Foster headed the new Alliance Science Initiative, working with researchers from 30 species to develop technology that could benefit everyone. The weapon he had created with Sound 4 was just the beginning. What could they accomplish when the galaxy's brightest minds worked together instead of in competition? Fleet Admiral Stone received reports of new threats emerging at the frontier, unknown species probing the borders, strange signals from dead space. The galaxy was not peaceful, would never be peaceful, but now they faced it together. She looked at her mixed crew and smiled slightly. "The Ravagers thought we were weak because we fought each other," she said. "They learned better. The next threat will learn too. This galaxy has Deathworlders now, and we do not fight alone anymore." Her communication officer, a young Quarix named Selene III, looked up from his station. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority message from the outer colonies. Reports of unusual energy signatures. Could be another hostile force." Stone settled into her command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the strength of knowing she did not carry it alone. Around her, humans and aliens worked side by side, preparing for whatever came next. They had been enemies. They had become reluctant allies. Now they were something more. "All ships prepare for deployment," she ordered, "and send a message to Admiral Cross. Tell him the Deathworlders have a new mission. Tell him we are ready." The Defiance turned toward the unknown threat, followed by a fleet that represented the entire galaxy. They were not perfect. Trust was still fragile and old wounds had not fully healed. But they were united in ways that mattered. They had learned the hardest lesson possible. That survival required more than strength. It required choosing to be better than your worst instincts. The galaxy thought humans were monsters because they came from a world that tried to kill them. They were wrong. Humans were not monsters. They were survivors who had learned that the only way to truly survive was to ensure everyone survived together, and now they would teach that lesson to anyone who threatened the hard-won peace. The Deathworlders were no longer alone in the void. They were guardians, and the galaxy was safer for it.